Neighbors tell me when the shots first rang out, there were a lot of people in their front yard trying to figure out what was going on. And now, even though they know what happened, there's still a lot of confusion in this neighborhood.
To know that this happened, this is heartbreaking. Samisha
Johnson is one of many who can't understand how an argument cost a woman she knew her life.
I'm praying for both families, and it's just real sad.
Police flooded this area around 7 o'clock on Thursday after multiple 911 calls.
He shot himself. He just shot himself with his own gun.
Okay, what is the address?
That sounded like a gunshot. So what I did is kind of like walked up to the fence and looked down the street to see.
Theodore Carter says he's familiar with the home he saw officers surrounding. Daytona Beach police say it belongs to the suspect, Chantel Adkins, and the victim, his wife, Shantae.
They seem like great people, like great couple, like maybe next door to your house, you know what I'm saying? You would never think that something like that would ever happen like that.
Investigators say when an argument broke out on Thursday, Shantae called her parents for help. Right after that, they say Chantel pulled out a rifle, shooting and killing her.
It's not worth it at all. I feel like they could have came to some type of probably a common ground.
They say Chantel then shot himself in the chest. He's still in the hospital.
It started like any other quiet morning in a suburban Florida neighborhood. Neighbors later told investigators nothing seemed unusual until everything changed within hours. Daniel Harper and his wife, Melissa Harper, had been married for 7 years. To outsiders, they appeared stable, even happy. But behind closed doors, tension had been building for months. On that morning, Melissa made a discovery that would ignite a chain of events no one could undo. While using Daniel's phone, she came across messages, explicit, undeniable, and recent. The evidence pointed clearly to an ongoing affair. When Daniel returned home shortly after, Melissa confronted him. According to later reports, the argument escalated quickly. Voices were raised. Accusations flew. The calm of the neighborhood was broken by anger spilling out of a marriage already on edge. Melissa, shaken and furious, called her parents, Robert Collins and Linda Collins, asking them to come over immediately. She didn't feel safe. She needed support. By the time her parents arrived, the situation had only grown more volatile. Daniel reportedly became increasingly agitated as more people became involved. What started as a private confrontation was now unfolding in front of witnesses. No one present could have predicted just how far things would go. That morning, what should have been a difficult conversation turned into the beginning of a tragedy that would leave an entire community in shock. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. When Robert Collins and Linda Collins arrived, they immediately sensed the tension inside the Harper home. Melissa was visibly shaken, packing the living room, while Daniel stood near the kitchen, defensive and angry. Robert attempted to calm the situation, urging both sides to take a breath, but emotions were already too high. Melissa began explaining what she had found, the messages, the betrayal, the lies. Daniel denied parts of it at first, then shifted to frustration. Witnesses later said his tone changed rapidly, moving from defensive to confrontational. The argument grew louder, more chaotic. Linda tried to comfort her daughter, but Melissa's anger and hurt were overwhelming. She demanded honesty. She demanded answers. And most of all, she demanded accountability. Instead, the situation spiraled. Daniel reportedly left the room briefly. At the time, no one thought much of it. They assumed he needed space. But when he returned, everything changed in an instant. The atmosphere shifted from tense to terrifying. Robert later told investigators there was a moment, a split second, where he realized something was wrong. Something irreversible was about to happen. What followed would leave him and his wife traumatized, forced to witness something no parent should ever see. The calm of the neighborhood was shattered as chaos erupted inside the home. Within minutes, emergency calls would be made, sirens would fill the streets, and a quiet Florida morning would become the center of a devastating investigation. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. When Daniel Harper returned to the room, the energy had completely shifted. What had been a heated argument moments earlier suddenly became something far more dangerous. Melissa Harper stood near her parents, her voice still shaking as she demanded answers. Robert Collins stepped slightly in front of his daughter, sensing the tension escalating beyond control. Linda Collins clutched Melissa's arm, trying to steady her. Daniel's expression was no longer defensive. It was distant, cold, and unreadable. Witnesses later described a heavy silence that filled the room, as if everything paused for a split second. No one spoke, no one moved. Then in an instant, that silence was shattered. Chaos erupted. Robert instinctively reacted, shouting and trying to intervene, while Linda screamed in shock. Melissa barely had time to process what was happening before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Neighbors later reported hearing screams echoing from inside the house, followed by panic and confusion. Within moments, someone had called 911. Inside, the scene was devastating. Robert and Linda were left in complete disbelief, their world collapsing in front of them in a matter of seconds. What began as a confrontation over betrayal had escalated into a life-altering tragedy, one that would leave emotional scars on everyone involved. As emergency responders rushed to the scene, the reality of what had just occurred began to set in. Nothing would ever be the same again. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. The 911 call came in just minutes after the chaos began.
We live. Big bruh. We out here. Happy birthday to my pops too. I'll be around there later, pops. We out here. What we doing?
Celebrating.
Can I get a go game from everybody? No go game? Okay. Y'all all kicked out my street. Oh, she nasty. That's my wife though. I married her.
She's got one hole to the right temple. Patient is conscious alert, answers questions appropriately. GCS of 15. Actually, GCS of 13. She's got one hole to the left or the right.
The operator struggled to make sense of the frantic voice on the other end. Panic, shouting, and disbelief filled every word. Inside the home, Robert Collins was trying desperately to communicate what had happened, his voice shaking uncontrollably. Linda Collins could be heard crying in the background, repeating her daughter's name over and over. The dispatcher urged them to stay calm, to provide details, to help was on the way. But calm was impossible. Neighbors began stepping outside, drawn by the noise. Some recorded from a distance, others simply stood frozen, unsure of what they were witnessing. Sirens soon cut through the neighborhood, growing louder with each passing second. When law enforcement arrived, they moved quickly, securing the scene and separating those inside. Officers later described the atmosphere as overwhelming, filled with shock, grief, and confusion. Daniel Harper was taken into custody without resistance. Witnesses noted his quiet demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Paramedics worked urgently, but the situation inside the home was already devastating. Robert and Linda were left clinging to each other, struggling to process the unthinkable. For investigators, the scene raised immediate questions. What led to this moment? How did a domestic argument escalate so drastically? As details began to emerge, one thing became painfully clear. This was not just a crime scene. It was the aftermath of a relationship unraveling in the most tragic way possible. And the investigation was only just beginning. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. As the scene was secured, investigators began piecing together what had led to the tragedy. Detectives moved methodically through the home, documenting every detail, every sign of the argument that had spiraled out of control. Daniel Harper was transported to the station for questioning. According to early reports, he remained largely silent, offering limited responses as detectives pressed for answers. Meanwhile, Robert Collins and Linda Collins were interviewed separately. Their statements painted a picture of a marriage under strain, with emotions reaching a breaking point that morning. They described Melissa's discovery, her confrontation, and the rapid escalation that followed. Each detail added another layer to a case that was already deeply disturbing. Investigators also began examining digital evidence. Phones were collected, messages reviewed, and timelines constructed. The alleged affair quickly became a key element in understanding motive. Neighbors were questioned as well. Some reported hearing raised voices earlier in the day, while others described the sudden shift from normalcy to chaos. Forensic teams worked late into the evening, carefully analyzing the scene. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every detail could help explain how things escalated so quickly. As news of the incident spread, the community was left in shock. Friends and acquaintances struggled to reconcile the image they had of the couple with the events that had taken place. What had seemed like a private marital issue had now become a public tragedy, one that demanded answers. And as investigators dug deeper, they knew this case would only grow more complex. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. Days later, Daniel Harper appeared in court for the first time. The atmosphere was heavy as family members, reporters, and members of the public filled the room. Robert Collins and Linda Collins sat together, their grief visible, their presence a reminder of the devastating loss they had suffered. Daniel stood before the judge, his expression neutral, offering little insight into his thoughts. The charges were read aloud, each word echoing through the courtroom. Prosecutors outlined the events as they understood them. A domestic dispute that escalated into a violent act, witnessed by Melissa's own parents. The defense, however, signaled that they would argue emotional distress, pointing to the intense confrontation that had unfolded that morning. They emphasized the suddenness of the situation, suggesting it was not premeditated. But for many in the courtroom, those arguments did little to ease the weight of what had happened. The judge ordered Daniel to be held without bond, citing the severity of the case. As he was escorted out, the room remained silent. Outside, media coverage intensified. Headlines spread rapidly, drawing national attention. The story struck a chord: betrayal, confrontation, and tragedy all unfolding within a single day. For Melissa's family, however, this was not a headline. It was their reality. And as the legal process began to unfold, they were left to face a future forever changed by one irreversible moment. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. In the days following the incident, the quiet Florida neighborhood struggled to process what had happened. Yellow tape still surrounded the home, serving as a stark reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. Neighbors gathered in small groups, sharing what little they knew. Many described Melissa Harper as kind and warm, someone who always greeted others with a smile. The contrast between those memories and the events of that morning felt impossible to reconcile. A small memorial began to form near the property. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes appeared, each one expressing grief, disbelief, and support for the family. Robert Collins and Linda Collins remained largely out of the public eye, focusing on mourning their daughter. Friends close to the family described them as devastated but grateful for the outpouring of support. Local authorities also addressed the community, emphasizing the importance of conflict resolution and seeking help in moments of crisis. They reminded residents that situations can escalate quickly, often with irreversible consequences. Meanwhile, the case continued to gain attention online. Discussions spread across social media, with people debating the events, the motives, and the warning signs that may have been missed. For those who lived nearby, however, it wasn't a topic for debate. It was a painful reality they had witnessed firsthand. The neighborhood, once defined by its quiet routine, was now marked by a tragedy that would not be forgotten anytime soon. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates. As weeks passed, the legal case against Daniel Harper moved forward, but the emotional impact remained deeply rooted in everyone affected. For Robert Collins and Linda Collins, each day was a struggle. They were left not only with grief, but with the trauma of having witnessed the final moments of their daughter's life. Support groups, counseling, and community outreach became essential as they navigated a loss that words could not fully capture. Investigators finalized their reports, building a case based on witness statements, digital evidence, and forensic analysis. The timeline was clear, the sequence of events undeniable. For the prosecution, the focus remained on accountability. For the defense, the strategy centered on context and emotional state. But beyond the courtroom, the story served as a stark reminder of how quickly situations can escalate and how devastating the consequences can be. The home where it all happened would eventually be cleared, the tape removed, the neighborhood returning to some sense of normalcy. But for those directly impacted, normal would never truly return. This case became more than just a headline. It became a cautionary tale, one that highlighted the dangers of unchecked emotion, unresolved conflict, and decisions made in moments of intense anger. And as the legal process continued, one truth remained undeniable. A single moment had changed everything forever. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories and updates.